Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel. A couple weeks ago, I did a video titled The Worst Books I've Read According to GoodReads, and today I wanted to do the opposite of that. So these are going to be the best books that I have read according to GoodReads. So I went ahead and picked off the 13 best books that I have read according to GoodReads, and then I have a couple other things. So I will be going over what the GoodReads ranking is, what my star ranking is, and what it ranks out of all of the books that I have read since 2019. So let's go ahead and get started with the book in 13th place, which is Yumi and the Nightmare Painter by Brandon Sanderson. And this has a 4.49 on GoodReads. I gave it a 4-star rating, and it ranks at 91st out of 255 books that I have read. Now, I was pretty surprised to see this book this high up because I thought I had heard that this book was kind of divisive amongst Cosmere fans. Now, this was my favorite Secret Project book, so I was kind of pleasantly surprised. But in general, you know, it being somewhat of a romance story in a Cosmere world that is not really interconnected too much with the rest of the Cosmere, I was surprised to see it have this high of a ranking. Now, Sanderson is going to be featured very heavily in this list, so I guess it's not too surprising to see one of his books. Also, I'm sure something that skews this as a little bit is that really only Sanderson fans were going to be reading this book. I don't think this is, actually this could be your first entry into the Cosmere. You might be a little confused with some of the things going on, but I do think this is Sanderson's best romance, and I do see why people like it. But I just remember when this one came out, it being a little bit more divisive amongst everybody. So the fact that it is the highest of the ones that I have read, I just didn't expect it to be there. Next up is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, and this has a 4.51 rating. I gave it a 4-star rating, and it ranks number 34 out of 255 for me. And I think this is a book where if I went back and reordered my top rankings of all time, even though it's already in the top 35, I think this is a book that might creep up even higher. This is a book that I have such fond memories of. I think the audiobook is the best way to experience this book for reasons that are a massive spoiler, but I just remember listening to it and just being blown away by some things that happened probably about a quarter into this book, and I just have such fond memories of it. I have not read anything else by Andy Weir. I probably should read The Martian at some point. I have seen the movie. I do think that, you know, there are similar stories, but in general, this is one of the books that I recommend the most to people because I think it's a fun, good time that is not too science heavy, but it does have enough to like keep you interested. There's action, heartbreak, just everything you want in a book is in Project Hail Mary, so I think it is very much deserving of its very high ranking. Next up, we get our next Brandon Sanderson entry, and that is The Hero of Ages, which ends up having a 4.54 ratings. I gave it a 4-star, and I have it ranked 50 out of 255, and I believe this is my least favorite of Mistborn Era 1. There was just something about it. Actually, no, that's not true. The Well of Ascension, I think, is my least favorite of those three, now that I think about it, but there's not that big of a difference between them. You know, this is another one of those books that probably gets more rankings because it is the last book in a trilogy, and you'll see some of that with some of the books mentioned here later, where they're so deep into a series, the only people who are going to be reading them are fans of the series, and I think some of that definitely is being shown here with The Hero of Ages. And like I said, while it's not my favorite from Era 1, it is still a very good book. I would be very curious on if I went back and read Mistborn Era 1 now, how it would feel, because that's the books I started my Cosmere journey on, and so I was just so excited to get into the Cosmere. I wonder if I have them elevated a little higher than they should be if I were to go back and do a reread. I'm not saying I wouldn't enjoy them, but I am saying that now that I have experienced more of the Cosmere, I wonder where they would end up ranking inside of that. All right, now let's go ahead and break into the top 10, and we start with Leviathan Thalls with another 4.54, which I gave a 4-star rating as well, and I have this ranked as 67 out of 255. This is the last book in the Expanse series by James S.A. Corey. I think it is a very well done ending. There was a lot of things that happened that I just think tied up very nicely. It has pretty much all of the emotions that you want in an ending. There's happiness, sadness. Most things are resolved. There is, I mean, it's a super hard story to, you know, wrap up. Any series that is, what, I think it's 9 books. You know, anything that's that long, it is going to be quite the monumental achievement to end it satisfyingly. And so to see it this highly ranked, I agree with it. I think that they did a fantastic job of finishing it and making it a great ending. The Expanse is one of my favorite series. I don't know where it would rank all time if I was going to rank all of my series, but it would have to be really high up there. If you have not started The Expanse, I absolutely recommend that you do. Now let's go ahead and move on to number 9, which is Hunger of the Gods by John Gwynne, which has a 4.55. I gave it a 4-star, and I have it ranked at 61st out of 255. So another very high ranking book for me. I enjoyed this more than The Shadow of the Gods, which is the first book in the Bloodsworn Saga. And I think we are getting book 3, which I think is supposed to be the last book here later this year, which is very exciting news. I'm very excited for that. I'm just assuming it's going to be amazing, because for me, John Gwynne is 2 for 2. They're the only books I've read by him so far, but they are fantastic. And, this is one of those books that if it is going to be a trilogy, it does not have any middle book syndrome. This book, it picks up where the last one ended and just keeps on running with a lot of major things happening. And the ending of this book is absolutely chilling. It is a fantastic ending, and I'm really curious on where the story is going to go from that ending. It's just a lot that happens, and John Gwynne is just so brilliant at writing action scenes that it is next level. There are not many people I would put up on the same pedestal as him, and it is a very good time. It has that nice mix of what you would call like a traditional fantasy story, but with enough that changes it. And obviously this isn't even taking place in what most people would consider a traditional fantasy setting, but it still has some of those elements. So it's going to be like a nice, warm, cozy blanket, but also like something exciting is happening at the same time, and like you'll be blown away. The magic here is super interesting. So if you have not read the Bloodsworn Saga, you absolutely should. This is another book that I completely agree with the ranking. With that being said, let's go ahead and get to the book that is going to probably make the most people angry at me, and this is the first book that I kind of disagree with how highly it is rated, and that is Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien. It has a 4.56 rating. I gave it a 3-star rating, and I know everybody is going to be upset by that, and you're also going to be upset that I have this ranked at 185 out of 255. Now, I do not hate The Lord of the Rings by any stretch of the imagination. I appreciate what it has done for the genre. I understand that it is like the foundation that every story from there basically stands on the shoulders of. I get all of that. It's just whenever I read it as an adult, I didn't read it as a kid, The Hobbit or any of it. When I read it as an adult, I don't know, I just didn't have the best time with it. I'm curious on if now that I have read more, if I would like it more or less. It's one of those things where it's like, can I really appreciate what it did now after reading so many other fantasy stories? Or will I see the improvements that have been made in the genre that just put other books so far and above Return to the King? And honestly, the whole trilogy is, not very high for me. They're all kind of clumped together if you want to know down in that kind of ranking in that 185-ish range. And, there are definitely very beautiful parts of it. There are some things that, I absolutely do admire and appreciate. Like the Shire is one of the places that I would want to live if I were going to be in a fantasy world. And I don't think I'm the only one who would say that. The way it's described, the setting, and just, all of that, it is fantastic, but there were just so many parts of it that I was bored, and, it just wasn't for me. And like I said, I still very much appreciate it, and I did like it. I just wasn't blown away by it, like most people seem to be when they read it, and they just have such a deeper appreciation of the series than I do. And I know I'm talking about the series as a whole here, and really Return of the King is the one on the list, but it's just kind of the same feeling for all 3 of the books, which are technically one book, if I think. Right? So yeah, that's my hot take in this video for Lord of the... Actually, I'll have another hot take here at the very end of the video, but that is the first one to get everybody riled up. Now, speaking of a giant that I think stood on the shoulders of Lord of the Ring, especially with the first book in the series, Eye of the World, we have Memory of Light, which is the last book in the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan / Brandon Sanderson. And technically, this book was written mostly by Sanderson, I guess, though he's going off all kinds of notes from Robert Jordan. And I think there is a chapter that's as long as the first Harry Potter book that was completely written by Jordan. So it is definitely a mix of the authors here. And that book has a 4.57 rating. I gave it a 4-star rating, and it is number 56 out of 255 for me. Now, A Memory of Light, I should have looked. It is not my favorite of the Wheel of Time books, but it is definitely high up there. It is another one of those books, just like Leviathan Falls, that, man, how do you wrap up a series that's that long, that has that many moving components, that has that many characters, that has that much, just stuff to finish up? And while not everything is executed perfectly here, and I think Wheel of Time fans will know the one thing that I'm, more in particular thinking about when I say that at the very end of the story with one of the bad guys, I do think most things were wrapped up very well. I one of my favorite moments in all of The Wheel of Time is the very ending of this book. I think it's just really well done. I think the last battle that we get, the way it happens and the way it works, I think is so much more satisfying than anything I could have thought of. I think it kind of caught me by surprise the way that happens, but I think it works so much better for the series. And it was just, it's just such a hard thing to finish, and I had such a hangover when I finished The Wheel of Time. This book definitely is very special to me. The whole series is in particular, and this is another one I completely agree with the ranking. And now we will be returning to The Expanse with Tiamat's Wrath by James S.A. Corey. It has a 4.57 rating. I gave this book a 5-star ranking, so this is the first 5-star that we have seen on this list, and this is actually my second favorite book of all time. I have a spoiler review for this book that I did very early on in my channel, and it is still one of my favorite videos that I have ever done. I think it's like 30 minutes long, maybe even a little bit longer, and it is just me gushing about this book for that entire time, just talking full spoilers because I feel like that was the only way I could talk about it. That's not normally something I try to do, but this book is truly something special. I absolutely love this book. This is one of the few books that I have ever read that I feel like was written specifically for me, which obviously can't be true because other people love this book probably just as much, if not more than me. But just every word just was perfect. There was nothing I would have changed. Everything about it was absolutely perfect. So much happens in this book. So many things change, just so much, and all of it just felt like it was exactly what I wanted. I would explain this as like a very selfish read because everything was just perfect for me. It was just me, and so this book is just absolutely fantastic. I was glad to see that it was ranked this highly by everybody else. I have seen a few other people's list of ranking The Expanse, and this one always seems to be extremely high up on everyone's list, so it's not really that big of a surprise. But this book alone makes reading all of the other Expanse books and short stories or novellas worth it. I would recommend anybody read The Expanse just to get to this book. That's how much I care about it. And like I said, this is a me book. It's very selfish. It's like everything is perfect for me, but I absolutely think that it made the entire experience worth it. Before I got to this book, I had liked The Expanse. I think the last 3 books are easily the best of the bunch, and this book is really what catapulted it to that like upper echelon of me loving the series. That's how powerful this one book is. So we are gonna change it up just a little bit here because 4 books in the top 5 are all from the same author. So I want to mention the one book that kind of breaks that up, which really surprised me because it's a new release by Jay Kristoff, and that is Empire of the Damned. It is the 3rd highest ranked book I have, and it has a 4.62 rating with I gave it 4 stars, and it is ranked 39th out of 255 for me. I really enjoyed Empire of the Damned. I thought it was everything I wanted and more from the first book. After reading the first book, I basically wanted that, but more. And that's exactly what we got. The world expanded, the visceral and just like aggression is still there in the book, and just everything I wanted from it is there. And I think this is maybe because it's still a new book that only people who are really into the series have gotten in and read it. So I'd be curious if I look back at this list again in like 9 months, if this had dropped at all, because more casual people will probably get around to reading it by that point, and it might lower down the ranking because they might not enjoy it as much as some of us more hardcore fans who have, really tried to read it early on in its release cycle. But yeah, that is a great series. If you have not read it, you'll know very quickly if it's a series for you. It does not hold any punches. Like, this isn't going to be a book that you need to, or I'm speaking of Empire of the Vampire here technically because that's the first book. If you're interested in the series, you'll know within 50 pages if it's a book you're going to like. It does not hold any punches. It is itself from the beginning. This isn't going to be one of those books where you're halfway through and all of a sudden it throws you a curveball and it's something you don't expect. You're going to know very early on if this is something you want to read. And I highly recommend you give it a try because it's scary. It's not even scary vampires. To me, it's the way vampires should be written. Like, this is the best example of vampires I have ever seen, and I just really enjoy the world and the writing. So definitely recommend, and I'm glad to see that it has this high of a ranking. Now, like I said, the rest of my top 5, so first, second, fourth, and fifth are all the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. So Rhythm of War is the lowest ranked with a 4.62. I gave it a 4 star, and it is ranked 65 out of 255 for me. Then Oathbringer is next up, and it actually has the same ranking. It's tied with Rhythm of War with a 4.62. I think it is a little bit better than Rhythm of War, so it's at 63 out of 255. Then you have a pretty significant jump up to The Way of Kings with a 4.66. I gave it a 4-star, but have it ranked a little bit higher than the other two at 28th overall. And then I think for a while, Words of Radiance may have been the highest rated book on Goodreads over a certain threshold. It has a whopping 4.76 stars. I did give it a 5-star as well, and I have it as the 12th best book I have ever read. So I'm just going to kind of talk briefly about Stormlight as a whole. I do think that the series starts out significantly stronger than it finishes. I feel like Rhythm of War is an important book for the series. A lot of important things happen, but it probably could have been like 200 pages shorter. So that is why it is lower in my rankings. Still a fantastic book, but definitely felt like there was some fat that could have been trimmed out of there. And that is something I am a little bit worried about for book 5. It sounds like it's going to be super long, which on one part of me I'm very excited about. And then part of me is also worried, is it going to be more like Rhythm of War? Or is it going to be more like Words of Radiance? Not that either of them are bad, but one is significantly better in my opinion. I do think it is impressive that Sanderson has this many books in my top list. I can't say I'm that surprised. He is a clearly beloved author who is very interactive with his fans, and it just seems like he kind of has the formula right now on what to do and how to do it. But I do think it also shows something, that to have books this highly rated, that the words are still good. It's not just like a YouTube marketing gimmick he's got going on. The dude can write. And I know a lot of people, because he is so popular, like to naysay and like pick on things that smaller authors would not get picked on for. But I think the proof is in the pudding that if you read these books, they are fantastic. And I just found it extremely impressive that he somehow took 4 of the top 5 spots for me on Goodreads. That is just absolutely crazy. Now, just a couple other stats in case you were wondering. My favorite book of all time, Death's Ends by Session Liu. That is my 1 out of 255. It has a 4.42 star rating, so still a pretty high Goodreads rating. I was actually kind of surprised. It was one of those I was surprised, but also not this surprised to see it that high, because once again, it's one of those, people are not going to read The Three-Body Problem and Dark Forest and then Death's End if they're not enjoying the series, because they're not the easiest thing to read. There's definitely some effort you need to put in, because they are very hard sci-fi, and there's a lot of scientific concepts that you have to deal with and get through, and then the characters are pretty flat, you know? There's not a whole lot of character growth between a lot of characters, and just the scale of the story is just mind-blowing. It is absolutely kind of next world, very ambitious. So it was nice to see that my favorite book still had a pretty high rating. I also wanted to shout out The Engineer, which is a book by Will White. He is much more known for his Cradle series, but I just wanted to shout this out because I think it is a fantastic series. It is super good, but I feel like it's not getting the attention it deserves, but it is highly rated. So I did just want to bring that to attention. I do also want to shout out Return to Adan, which I just recently finished and had a review for last week. And I believe this is the highest self-pub book I have, and it has a 4.44 rating. Highly recommend you read the series. It has that good bit of classical fantasy, feel to it, but with a whole new spin on it. Some really cool themes interjected into the story. And like I said, I think that is the highest I had for any self-pub book that I had read on Goodreads, which is awesome to see. I also just wanted to mention the highest rated book for my second favorite, well, probably my second favorite fantasy series. I don't know, I might need to revisit that list as well, but that would be Fury Song. This is probably a series you have never heard of. It was a little popular a few years ago. I think the first book, Fireborn is the first book, and that's actually my favorite of the trilogy, but it has a 4.45, and I have it ranked at number 20. So the series concludes with a super good book. I think the first book, Fireborn, is a top 5 book for me. So, a series that does, amazingly well. Then I just wanted to mention the lowest rated book that I have, which is ranked 231 out of 255. That has the highest rating, and it is Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield. It has a 4.4 rating. I gave it 2 stars, like I said, 231 out of 255. This is like the best book I have ever read that I just didn't like. And that's why it's rated so low. I just did not enjoy much about it. I think as a historical fiction kind of book, it is really well done. I can appreciate so much about this book, and yet the entire time I just wanted to be done reading it, which I think is really funny. And then I just wanted to mention one other book, a book that I despise, that I hate, that I had a horrible time with. I have it ranked. There's technically one book I hated more, but this is Circe by Madeline Miller. I have it ranked at 254 out of 255. Just a book everything about it I hated. If you want to talk about a book that was not made for me, like Time Match Wrath, I say, is for me. Like that is a selfish book. This is the epitome of the opposite of it. I had a horrible time with it. And I know I'm super in the minority in that, but I just thought it would be interesting to add on to this list. I think I talk about it in my worst books according to Goodreads as well, but I just felt like it was appropriate to talk about it again. But that is my list. I would love to know what yours are down below in the comments. What is your best book according to Goodreads? Does Sanderson take up most of your top 10? I would love to know if I'm not the only one out there who Sanderson has a stranglehold on. But that is all for me, and as always, have a good one.